ES broke higher, isn't holding. We'll have to wait and see. CAD holding very, very heavy. Some aggressive players into the morning will be looking for some profit taking, trying to flip long here on CAD. Not something that I would be doing. And, you know, nothing that interesting. Now, I have taken a trade this morning just to flip long, just to show you again. We don't usually talk about these, but just trying to show you about being busy on a Friday and looking for the most kind of interesting setups or something. So again, it's not a core trade, but you know, I'm just sharing it with you. So I took a flip long on Kiwi. Now, my thinking here on Kiwi is not really that technical, but you see what's happened. We've come back into this 50 back zone. It looks like we've had buyers coming in here, right? Now, this was all based on that RBNZ talking down, right? Smack back down and it gets bought again. At a decent support zone, okay? So, my thinking is that as long this is the meat of the move, and this is probably going to stay heavy until we get that RBNZ rate meeting next week, correct? So market wasn't thinking we're going to get a rate cut. RBNZ said, hey, we could get a rate cut. Everybody says, let's use a technical term, should a brick sell, right? They might cut. They're nuts. They're crazy. This is the end of the world, right? So we get a little move down. Now, what happens? It looks like, bam, this is the big move on that news. It tried to rally smack down, and it seems to be basing in this area. Does that make sense? So, my assumption is, now, unless the RBNZ comes in again and says something, there's no real reason for this to sell off even more. Maybe later on in the day on data, but unless we get some kind of data or something, there's not an awful lot of reason for this to really get smacked down, right? Especially since bids are supporting, okay? On the other hand, until we get this rate meeting, there's no real reason for this to rally hard, right? Because everybody's going to say, you know, if this pops hard, is going to be on the rate meeting when they don't hike, if they don't cut the rates, okay? So the assumption is that we'll get some very choppy action around this range until next week. We might try and get some kind of fake out around these lows. We might kind of get some kind of fake out around these highs. But broadly speaking, we'll stay fairly choppy. Do we agree? Just 50 talking cents so far. Again, it doesn't have to be right or wrong. You just have to have a coherent way of looking at it, okay? So as we assume this is going to stay in range, what I see is I've got about 20 pips, 22 pips to the downside from here, right? You see, it was actually a bit lower when I looked at it earlier on, right? But this is on a 15-minute. It's probably easier to look at this. About 20 pips to the so we got about 22, 23 pips to the downside now, and we've got about 44 to the upside. So the only way I'm looking at it is, I don't want to be greedy, but if I get long here, I'm long a bit lower. I don't have a 1 to 2. But I'm not really playing, well, I had a 1 to 2, but anyways, I'm not playing for the 1 to 2. What I'm looking at is, would it be crazy to expect that throughout the day or throughout this kind of chop, market would eventually end up coming back to this mid-range area? Whether it's the 50, whether it's the 61.8, right? We're probably trading at something like a 38.6, whatever, right? So you'd probably expect price to continue to gravitate around this level today, or especially as we get closer to the open. So, you know, you got about 10-20 pips to get back into here. So even if I'm trading a 1-to-1 risk reward, I think it's a decent bet that this is I'm gonna be able to bank 20 pips or so. Now the tricky thing with these trades is that if it starts going higher, there's a good chance it could go into those highs. But because you're trading with a 1-to-1 risk reward, assuming you take it here, the trick is not to be greedy. If you can bank one of these pips every day, you're doing good, right? So I'm going to force myself to be in a situation where I don't care what happens to this pair, and I'm just going to look to try and scalp a 1-to-1, right? I couldn't care less what happens. The way I'm going to treat this is I'm going to try and take my stop on this, right? So whether you took it before 15, whether you take it now 20, I'm going to take that, and then I'm going to shut the chart down, right? I'm going to turn the chart off. That's finished. That's me for the day. It's just a morning scalp. I've just made a hypothesis around something. I think there's a good chance of something happen. I think there's at least a 50-50 chance, if not better, of this happening, taking into account the context. I'm ready to play it on a 1-to-2, but more than happy to take 1-to-1, 1-to-2 point. You know, so just a bit of a scalp into the open and see what happens, right? So, just to give you a little insight into what I've been doing this morning, right? That's the only thing which really seems to be interesting to me, especially because the